Last video, we talked about genes and what they mean for differences in our physical characteristics. We'll talk more about how genes work and the information they carry. Jasmine, can you talk about what makes up a copy of a gene?
Of course I can. The instructions for how your body grows are contained in specific numbers of bases along the DNA strand, called genes. Each gene has different sequences of A, T, C, G. Since A binds to T and C binds to G, a gene would look like this: A, T, G, G, C, C, G, A, T, A. This strand has the instruction set, the sense strand. T, A, C, C, G, G, C, T, A, T. This strand does not have the instructions, so it is the antisense strand. Each pair of bases, such as the first pair above, AT, is called an allele, which contributes to specific characteristics like black hair, red hair, and blue eyes. For example, there is an allele for black hair and a different allele for red hair. Some alleles are dominant. This means there is a higher probability of the phenotype or physical characteristic being expressed in the offspring. For example, when a dog with black hair and a dog with gold hair have puppies, most of their litter will have gold hair, if gold hair is the dominant allele. Even if a puppy has an allele for black hair and gold hair, the puppy will still have gold hair. Black hair is the recessive allele in this case, and since less often in the litter. In addition, there will be puppies with black hair if the puppy has both alleles for black hair. We have a few more things to share with you. Nicole, would you mind sharing some definitions?
Sure. So in genetics, when a gene is homozygous, there are two copies of the same allele for a gene. A gene is heterozygous when there are two different copies of an allele that make up that gene. One can have normal alleles, and so we call this being wild type for this gene. Alternatively, one can have mutations on both strands, and we call this homozygous variant. One can also have mutations on only one strand, and we call this heterozygous variant. Wild type alleles are generally seen in people without genetic mutations or disease conditions. And once again, an allele can be dominant or recessive. In general, recessive alleles are only expressed when the person or animal is homozygous for that allele. Next, we can look at the molecular level of what genes do now that we've learned some new words. Jasmine?
Different alleles contribute to differences in proteins. Genes are used to make proteins, which are very small molecules that are the building blocks of cells. Some proteins build structures like bones and tendons, and others contribute to the chemical reactions in our body that contribute to what we call life. Genetic information is turned into a protein through the process of transcription and translation. Transcription is when a molecule is called a messenger RNA and it reads the DNA sequence. Translation is when the messenger RNA gathers the building blocks of proteins called amino acids, and they attach the amino acids to each other to form proteins. There are some parts of your DNA that do not contribute to genes, but can affect how often a certain protein is made, or can block the messengers from telling cell machinery what to build. The protein determines the function of the cells in the body. Would you like to talk a little more about proteins and their receptors, Nicole?
Sure. So we've learned already that certain molecules called nucleotides like to bind to certain other nucleotides, like A to T and C to G. Proteins can also bind to each other. One binding molecule is usually called a receptor, to which another specific molecule binds, called a ligand. This receptor-ligand interaction is important since cells are composed of a membrane bag in which all of the living matter is contained. This cell membrane separates all the chemical reactions of each cell from each other. So how does nature allow a cell to respond to the action of other cells without disturbing this important membrane bag? Receptors can be expressed in the membrane of the cells. These membrane-bound receptors accept their binding ligand, causing a stimulation of a message to the inside of the cell. This message in turn can bind to receptors inside the cell, which we call intracellular messengers, and sends a variety of signals that collectively allow cells to live.
Our next video will include more information about genetics and your kidneys. We'll learn more about how different alleles of a signal protein can affect a receptor. Stay tuned.